Hello, I'm David Reed, Extension Tobacco Agronomist at the Virginia Tech Southern Piedmont Center. This presentation will briefly go over some research that we currently have underway to evaluate potential yield-promoting products and production practices for flue-cured tobacco. Why are we interested in increasing our yield? For one reason is that when we look at the price of U.S. tobacco, it is comparatively high to other countries in the world, and any increase in price that our growers receive is very unlikely to occur. So we've got to produce as much tobacco as possible. We have to increase our yields as much as possible to allow us to spread out our overall cost of production over more pounds of tobacco, thus reducing the individual or per pound cost of production. What are some of our yield limiting factors? The first point there would be pests and suckers. They are certainly potential losses of yield for our growers, but our growers routinely address these, and I think we've got a very good handle on these losses that are occurring from pests and suckers. Fertilization is the next factor, and nitrogen rate is always something that we look at in terms of yield, but is actually seldom a limiting factor, and more likely than not, excessive nitrogen will impact us more than having a nitrogen rate that is too low. Excessive nitrogen, as we're all aware, will delay the harvest completion of our tobacco and has the potential to reduce the quality of the tobacco as well. Variety selection is always an important factor, but in terms of yield, it probably does not play a very big role. Variety selection is more important, related to disease resistance and how well the tobacco of a particular variety will cure for an individual grower. That's certainly more important. When we look at the potential yield across several different varieties, the actual difference between one variety and another is relatively minor. Irrigation is also a factor. It probably does not play a big role in overall yield, but it does impact the timeliness of our harvest more than yield. One factor that I'm particularly interested in is the root system that we have on our crop, and trying to develop as robust a root system as possible with the intent of having a robust root system having positive impact on the crop overall and how it responds to environmental stresses. When we look at our best, most disease-resistant varieties that we are growing today, one factor that's in common with a lot of these varieties is they typically have very small root systems compared to varieties that are not resistant to many of the soil-borne diseases that we have. Thus, these reduced root system or smaller root system size may impact how the crop responds to environmental stresses throughout the year, such as dry soil conditions or high temperatures. A factor that's played a big role in our crops in recent years has been excessive early season rain. Several inches of rain in the month following transplanting can certainly have a negative impact on how the roots of the crop develop, and this has a lingering effect on into the season as perhaps the soil conditions dry and we go through drought conditions, or how the crop responds to high temperatures later in the season as well. So what we're looking in this study is, or the series of studies, is how a robust root system will impact the ability of our tobacco crop to tolerate later moisture and heat stress, and how does this impact yield. There are several commercial products that have been evaluated with other crops that promote yield, increase our yield, impact or improve the crop response to environmental stresses. But very few of these products have been tested with tobacco, and some of the trials that have been conducted with tobacco have not shown very significant yield response. One reason why this could be the case is that the harvestable product for tobacco differs from many other crops. We're not harvesting grain. We are, in fact, harvesting vegetative material or leaves from the plant. And perhaps that is one reason why we don't see some of the potential yield responses to these products that we see with other crops. So we got several trials underway to evaluate potential practices that could increase our yield. Again, what I'm particularly interested in is the root system, and so we're looking at some products that can or are purported to increase or stimulate root growth. We're looking at products that will induce plant defense responses. We're monitoring soil moisture and how we can use soil moisture monitoring to minimize plant stress throughout the season. We've got a trial where we're looking at nutrient analysis. We're conducting repeated nutrient analysis through the season and then applying remedial foliar nutrient applications based on these tissue samples. We're also looking at late season applications of nitrogen and how this can impact our holding ability. In recent years, we have seen several instances where a crop can look very good throughout the entire season and then in the last month fade away very, very quickly and really fade away too quick for us to really harvest in a timely manner to preserve maximum yield and optimal quality of the tobacco. So we want to look at these late season applications of nitrogen. And then we're going to do a limited amount of work looking at some potentially new high yielding varieties that may have chemistries that are different than we're accustomed to. But here we want to mainly focus on the yield potential of these new varieties. So looking specifically at the root stimulant product evaluation, we've got 5 treatments there. The first is an untreated control that did not receive any additional product above our high phosphorus starter fertilizer. So we applied 10 pounds of 9-45-15 in the transplant setter water. The next treatment is Cytoplex, and that's contains some plant hormones, 3 of them in that particular product. Radiate, which is also a plant hormone product. It does not contain the gibberellic acid that the first product had, so we'll be able to compare those two. Stabilize RZ is a product that has some beneficial microorganisms, so we're taking a different approach toward stimulating root growth with this product. And then finally, Zypro and Receptor, which is a combination of 2 materials there. One is an enzyme that's going to hopefully impact how phosphorus is made available to the plant. And then the second product there has the 3 plant hormones that we talked about earlier. Each of these products were applied in the transplant setter water in combination with a high phosphorus transplant starter fertilizer. We also evaluated these treatments in both fumigated and non-fumigated plots, so we'll be able to compare the yield response to fumigation in these plots. However, we did not have significant disease pressure in this field, so we would not expect any real impact on any soil-borne diseases that we may have had or nematodes. So we're in the middle of this trial. Actually, we haven't harvested. We're getting close to harvesting that tobacco as we speak. But some mid-season observations. We did see some early season response in the root growth. Just some visual observations, nothing dramatic. We did see some visual trends in early season growth, and this was seen through topping. Surprisingly, we did not see a lot of differences between the fumigated and non-fumigated treatments. This photo shows you just a comparison of 2 of the treatments. On the left, we have 2 rows of the untreated control, and then 2 rows of the Cytoplex treatment. And as you can see, the Cytoplex treatment, we've got these plants are a little bit further developed in floral development compared to the untreated control. We have more in flower and full flower there compared to the untreated control. In reality, that's not a very substantial difference there, but the main factor that we want to look at, it will be the yield later in the season. The second study I'll talk about will be the induced plant resistance trial, and here the objective is just to evaluate commercially available products intended to induce natural plant defense mechanisms in the plant. So looking at our treatments, we had an untreated control, ActiGuard, which is a product that some of you are familiar with as a plant activator that induces the natural plant defense mechanisms or immunity to some diseases within the plant. LifeGuard WG is a similar product, but it goes about it in a different approach, more of a biological plant activator. VacuPlant is a product that stimulates plant defenses through a chemical within the plant that we're applying. And then Regalia RX is a plant extract that is intended to improve plant health. Certainly there are several products that we could have evaluated, but we chose these because each of these is approaching the induced plant resistance mechanism from a different approach, whether it's a natural or biological plant activator, a stimulant plant defense, or an extract. So, going back to the previous slide, again, we're in the middle of the season with those results there, and we'll see how things turn out at the end of the season. The next study I'll talk about is a study that we actually started last year, and it's looking at the timing of soil moisture deficit for the crop. And the objective here is to create multiple irrigation treatments to vary the level of available soil moisture at different stages of crop development. And how we're going to evaluate this will be looking obviously at cured leaf yield is paramount, the quality of the cured tobacco, and then the leaf chemistry of the cured tobacco. And all of this, we're using drip irrigation to allow us to irrigate individual plots throughout the field. This drip irrigation is not a standard production practice for our growers, but it allows us in a research setting to work on a much smaller scale to apply these treatments. And then we've also have 4 different varieties of tobacco in this trial. Looking at our treatment protocol, we divided the growing season into 4 segments or stages, and the first would be transplant to lay-by, lay-by to topping, topping to first harvest, or the period of time from the first harvest through the end of the harvest season, and that certainly can last for several weeks. So our first 4 treatments here, you can see we've just we're irrigating within a single crop growth stage here. So, transplant to lay-by for the first treatment, lay-by to topping for the second, and so forth. And we irrigate whenever our natural rainfall is less than an inch per week. Treatments 5, 6, and 7, we're irrigating 2 consecutive growth stages. So the treatment 5 there would be transplant to lay-by, followed by lay-by to topping, and so forth for treatment 6 and 7. Treatment 8, we're irrigating for the entire duration of the season. So whenever we fail to get at least an inch of rain in a week, we will irrigate the crop. And then treatment 9, we did not irrigate at any point in the growing season. So these are data from from 2019, simply showing the rainfall we received, that's the blue bars, and then the irrigations that each of the treatments received, and that's the red dots that you see on the graph. And on the right axis, at the bottom, treatment 1, that was irrigated 6 times from transplant to lay-by. The next treatment 2, irrigated 5 times from lay-by to topping, and then you see the other irrigation numbers. So treatment 8, where we irrigated throughout the growing season, for the full duration of the season, we irrigated this treatment 36 times. And I think it's interesting to note, treatment 4 there, that's just irrigation after we started harvesting, from the first harvest through harvest completion, irrigated 18 times. And if you remember back to last season, the latter part of August and September was very dry during this period of the season, and we did not have any significant rainfall, and so we had to irrigate quite a bit. That certainly would be atypical to irrigate during that portion of the season. But I think you'll see, with the data later, that we did get a response to that irrigation last year. But again, the growing season last year was somewhat unique in that dry, very dry harvest period. So looking at yield, our 3 highest yields there, above the average of a little over 2,900 pounds, would be irrigation topping the first harvest, or during the harvest season, or topping through the end of harvest. So again, we got a yield response last year to that late season irrigation. The 2 bars there to the left, those first 2 that are substantially below the average line, those are the treatments that received that early irrigation. Transplant to lay-by or lay-by to topping. Probably wasn't necessary to irrigate that tobacco. We would not have irrigated the tobacco, and I think that demonstrates the impact of excessive early season rainfall that's impacting, or water, whether it's irrigation or rainfall, but it's impacting root development early in the season, so we're having a smaller root system, and then as the season developed to be a dry year at the end of the season, these treatments that had early season irrigation, correspondingly lower or smaller root system, they were not as adapted and not as robust to accommodate that dry weather later. Just real quick numbers on nicotine. This is just nicotine in the last harvest, and the lowest nicotine level was that blue bar there, where we irrigated the whole duration of the season. Substantially less than what we see in the gray bar beside that did not receive any irrigation. So our irrigation treatments did impact nicotine levels in the leaf. And reducing sugars, we saw a positive response last season to where we irrigated late in the season during the harvest portion. And you see the 2 green bars there that are higher were irrigated during the harvest season, and then that blue bar is irrigated for the duration of the year. The treatment, the gray bar there that was not irrigated, you can see the lowest reducing sugar content. So that's a real quick discussion on these trials, and certainly in the coming year you'll be hearing more about this, and certainly welcome any questions or comments that you have. Please feel free to contact me, and I thank you for listening.